Terron, how did you initially become connected to Breakthrough Miami? What was life like for Terron before the Breakthrough experience and then since then?
What's pretty interesting about where I'm sitting is this is where I sat to write my breakthrough application. So um, I was a kid that was really good at school, kind of just nerdy, very excited about learning. I was an only child, and so there's an opportunity for me to socialize and talk to other people and show what I knew outside of my mother, my father, and I kind of quickly excelled through elementary school. I was identified to be in a gifted program, and I started to go to a school called Olinda Elementary School, which I was bused to, and I was in a fifth grade class. My favorite teacher ever to this day was Miss Booker. And I'll never forget this day in class when the Breakthrough Miami executive director, then executive director, John Flickinger, came into the class to try to convince us fifth graders to go to summer school voluntarily that summer. And I just thought it was like a ridiculous concept because at that time, you only really get to summer school if you needed like remediation, if you were falling behind, if you were struggling, you would go to summer school to get that extra help so that you could be on pace with your peers. I'm a genius, right? I get straight A's. Like, why would I opt into this when I usually would go to Key West, with my grandmother? And so I just distinctly, very vividly remember like just laughing at this white man, like this guy's coming with a really wild proposition. But fortunately, one of the best decisions that was ever made for me is my teacher, Miss Booker. She required everybody in the class, all 25 of us, to apply to Breakthrough. It was just compulsory. And her logic was like, you are going to go through life having to apply for opportunities, having to, put your hat in the ring, whether it be college, a job, internship, so forth. And you need to kind of get some reps at this process. So it became an assignment. And my mother, being a very active participant in my education that she's always been, she took it super seriously. And when she learned about the program, she made me write my application over and over again, like I was going to college. She like workshopped it with me, told me what was good, what wasn't good, and I went and I was selected. And I think that kind of like before picture is important because I think prior to Breakthrough, I was just in my educational journey and I had these kind of guardian angels around me who knew what was best and they were helping me like not go in the wrong direction, and they were sort of seeing that I had an opportunity to explore an intellectual gift. But then when I got to Breakthrough, um, the floodgates opened because it was the first time in my life that learning was cool, not just something that like I did to be compliant and obedient so that I could like have free time on the weekends or earn my um, allowance, but it was exciting, not just because I excelled at it, but because I was with a community of other Black kids in my city who like doing the same thing. And so I just remember going to the bus stop, it being super exciting, and riding the bus to campus was exciting, and going through every single class. I think it was the first time I've ever had more than 5 classes in a day, and I looked forward to the extra time. And so the way I sort of summarized the after period for Breakthrough for me is I like all of a sudden became incredibly intentional about leaning into my educational journey because it was not only something that I was good at, but it was something that I saw that other people like me enjoyed to do, and I kind of got a community. And from there, I mean, my trajectory changed quite literally.
So you mentioned your the guardian angels. You mentioned Miss Booker. I love the idea. Great teachers all around us, but really her being the catalyst in a lot of ways to ensuring that you were pushed to do this. You
Right.
mentioned just having a community to support you. So it sounds like in general, we know, I'm assuming the fact that you're on this call lets us know that you've had a very positive experience with Breakthrough and everything that came from it. So thinking back as you're just sort of reflecting on everything, what are some of like the nuances or difficulties you've had to navigate in just your early years before you became a professional, and just really what catches you off guard about some of those reflections?
Okay. I'll say, so one of the major outcomes of me going to Breakthrough, I went to Breakthrough as a student for 3 years. So from fifth grade to onto high school. But I guess as a result of my attendance and just really trying hard and exceeding, I was one of a handful of children that was invited to apply to Ransom Everglades up middle school, which was the host location for my school that summer. Um, and sorry if I over contextualize. I know you guys know so much about the program, but um, I got this invitation, and I remember once again sort of being very skeptical in the same way that I was skeptical like schools in the summer. Everybody goes to their neighborhood schools. And it's just a tradition thing. It's a cultural thing. It's something that people discuss at Thanksgiving. When there's holiday rivalry football games, it's people draw sides, and it becomes the source of a lot of witty banter. So I couldn't imagine, to your point about diversions, like not going to a middle and then a feeder high school in my neighborhood where all the kids, the people that I knew in my community went. So I was really skeptical to applying to Ransom Everglades. And when I got this invitation, there were a number of people at Breakthrough, and then that I was introduced to through Breakthrough, who were just like explaining to me and my mother that this opportunity is a once in a lifetime opportunity to go to this incredibly rigorous, prestigious, independent school. Not only will you get a better education, and it seems like you are on a hunt for a quality education, as evidenced by going to gifted schools and magnet schools, but you'll also be introduced to a network and a world. And this is just the right thing to do. And so my mother was very persuaded. And so we applied, interviewed, and we were selected. But this just meant me being completely extracted from everything that I had known at this juncture. Ransom Everglades is, I think, about 25 miles away from where I live. And my mother was a single mother at the time, so she has a job in the opposite direction, one car. And so I say all that to say that at the same time that I'm getting furnished with all of these sort of remarkable opportunities that people in my zip code and in my community, in my small village, if you will, don't really see, but recognize how important and life altering they could be. Nobody ever really gave a cautionary conversation about what comes with that. It was just sort of like, if you do this, your life will change, and the outcome of your life changing is going to be better and positive. And the reason why that's relevant is because my experience through Ransom, I went there from seventh grade, anything but linear. It was anything but complete with challenges. There were many points at which I thought it made more sense for me to just cut my losses and go back to the community that I know. I often question, why the heck am I doing this? There were times where I didn't think I was going to finish. I didn't think I was cut out for this. I was asking, why me, if you will. And I can say more about that, but to sort of just wrap up this answer, that sort of Byzantine experience in the 5 years from middle school to graduating through high school from Ransom ended up for me being like this bundle or microcosm of lessons that I would re-encounter over the course of my short life. I've already experienced these points of adversity, these points of like, if you create a great opportunity, there's great responsibility that comes with it. These ideas that you can get blessed with a chance, but that doesn't mean you have arrived. And that was just very, very surprising, just how complicated navigating a journey towards a better life can be. It's not really communicated in that way.
Can you give us like an example of what that sort of looks like? If you were to sort of think about painting a picture for those of us who might not fully understand it, what does that look like in your particular experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can give you tons of experiences. I think the first introduction to the school was, it just kind of happened, I think coincidentally, that like the year prior that I started, a number of children who were on either partial or full scholarships like left to go to different schools. Maybe they moved or what have you. I'm not sure of the context. So the year that I started 8th grade at Ransom, I was like maybe one of like an actual handful of students who were receiving financial aid. And so it was very like known that I didn't pay my way going there. And so as a result of this, I was getting so much like well-intentioned what's the best way to say this? Just help that just made me feel like really small and like I didn't belong. So I remember the second day of school, this extracurricular teacher, I think she taught like a special, she called myself and another one of my buddies into her office, and she um, just had a big box of clothes of like uniforms. And she was like, I know that this would be really helpful. Like the kids here, they sort of show their wealth in a very subtle way. And so I want you guys to have some clothes. And yeah, it's just like a really crappy feeling to get a box of clothes put on a desk in front of you on your second day of school. Because what the woman didn't know, if it's one thing about me and the people in my community, is we're gonna know how to dress. So I had already like done big shopping, like I had all kind of uniform shirts. I had my style planned out for the whole semester, and so did my best friend who I was going to ransom with. So not only was it like in a kind of funny, immature way, kind of offensive, like I was like, is she kind of talking about my fashion sense, but it just made me feel like, oh, like I am different. And why am I different? I like walk with hyper awareness. Okay. And she was well intentioned, but that's just sort of one sticking point. So if I give you a second one, you can see how these things kind of stack together. Another big story that comes to mind is when I was in high school, I wasn't really connecting with the English teachers that I had going through high school. I was joking about being a genius earlier, but one subject that I always excelled in, it was language arts. So writing, language arts, like I just used to crush it when I was a kid. So you can imagine I wanted to show that I was really good with words when I was at Ransom, because I was just different. So I wanted to show that I could belong. And the classes that I was taking, like I didn't really connect with the literature, and I wasn't really scoring high marks on my my written work. And I had this subtle instinct that there was a perspective gap in difference, that it wasn't my technical performance or me sort of like matching the criteria for success that the teachers outlined. But anyway, so I'm kind of like plodding along. So I kind of checked out, if you will. I was just kind of doing the minimum to get by. And it was just unlike me, particularly in that course. And so I finally got this opportunity that like reactivated my energy, my excitement, when a class that I was in read The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. If anybody has read this book, there's multiple characters that are narrating the text, and one of them is a character who's intellectually disabled. And so the cool thing about the novel is that it's written in like stream of consciousness. And so the assignment that we had in this particular course was to do a personal essay, about something deeply intimate to our lives, and then to try to mimic Faulkner's literary form. So I'm geeked. I'm like, oh, this is my chance, right? Like I can break with some of the like limitations that's been put on me in all these previous English classes. And I get to like tell my story. No one can tell my story better than me. And I write this paper about how at the time, my mother and then stepfather are going through a very, very tumultuous divorce. And I am like there sort of, kind of adolescently parenting my young sister, while like waking up at 3:30 in the morning to go on the other side of town to go to basketball practice, and at the top of school, then I go through 9 periods of class, then I go to basketball practice after school, then I do my homework on the Metro Rail, then I come home, and I'm just narrating my life. And I got accused of plagiarizing the thing. And it was just a gut punch, like just a complete gut punch. And I distinctly remember being like in the headmaster's office with the professor or the teacher, and being just told there's no way possible that this student could have created this work for all of these reasons. And I'll stop there. But as you could imagine, in that moment, I felt incredibly powerless. I might have been in 11th grade, so I'm like 3.5 years into this ransom experiment. And so I'm like, what's the diminishing returns here? Do I stick it out or can I go? But like, how can my best effort to participate in this community just be completely like, ignored or what have you? It was just a really, really challenging thing. And it felt like those clothes being dumped, in front of me on the second day of school.
But then with all that, what convinces you to sort of stay? So that, and I'm thinking about this, just who Terron becomes like it's talking about you as the third person, but like who you end up becoming, a lot of it is because of the experiences that you've had at this particular school. And obviously we've gone through the parts that like sort of hurt a little bit, but clearly there was enough to outweigh that. So like what was the, talking about diminishing returns, what was the calculation that you made to stay?
Well, so I mean, that's the breakthrough piece. That's the breakthrough collision points. That's the breakthrough relationship. Is that I always had relationships or mentors, whether they were, the executive director who is still a great mentor of mine, or former, breakthrough teachers that I just connected very deeply with and then stayed in contact with, or there was actually a breakthrough office that a lot of students of color would hang out at the school. And um, every time I had one of these sort of, you know, just tricky situations navigating this environment, I had this, I hesitate to use the term safe space because I think it's overused, but I did have a very safe space that was open and available for me to just come vent. This is before I even understood the value of catharsis or therapy. I just had a place that I could talk about these things. And then I had people that would help widen my aperture to give me some perspective on how no decision in life is perfect. You're always sort of calculating risk and trade-offs in life, whether it be in your professional or your personal pursuit. I saw someone, I forget who wrote this, but someone was talking about traveling the world to be a journalist, but then they fell in love. And and so this is just how life goes. You can't live your life in regret, but you ought to try to make decisions in the present to minimize that, potential regret in the future. And I just have really great people at Breakthrough that would always give me that context of like, hey, this is not without its challenges, but let me allow you to see the bigger picture. And fortunately, I'm not going to sit here and say I was persuaded every time, like that it was just the best logic, like sometimes it's just like, how can you take this person's side? How could you even argue their side? I'm a lawyer now, but at the time I'm like, how could you even, see that position? But I think what powered me to listen was all of the trust that had been established beforehand. Like quite literally, when I was a fifth grader, John Flickinger came into my classroom and asked us to trust him, that going to school in the summertime was going to be a sweet deal. And despite my skepticism, it was. And so I had that trust point. And then when that invitation to apply to ransom came, it was another request like, hey, trust us as this resource that has a vested interest in your educational journey and future. And my family trusted Breakthrough in that moment. And we followed the checklist, and we answered the call, and then it paid dividends again. So there was all of this capital that had been deposited. So every time there was this critical juncture where I'm like, yo, I'm about to quit this school. Like, I don't have a car. I have to catch the metro rail here and a bus and walk. And that sucks when my classmates are driving in speedboats to school in the morning. Like, what type of long-term investment am I making here? And I'm 35 years old right now, and I can say without equivocation that the advice to stick it through was correct.
I love that, because I think it brings me to my next question pretty directly. Just why? So you've been a Breakthrough Scholar, you've been a fellow, you've been even an associate site director. You've done so many things in the Breakthrough space. You've done other work in like just education space, whether it's through TFA, whether it's currently working with a charter school in Miami, working the education spaces in various ways. So you keep coming back to Breakthrough, and you work with education programs in general. So I guess it's sort of a two-part question of just what is it that you've come to realize about programs like ours, right? Organizations like ours that work with kids at the level that you were introduced to them at, like in terms of identity formation. And then what are you at this juncture of your life using those networks that you've built to do with your life?
Okay, so then multi-part question. The first part of the prompt, you were calling me an education addict. It sounded like
It sounded exactly like that.
It's interesting, when I've met people in sort of two camps. They hear that like I've gone to a lot of schooling and done some sort of education work in whatever sort of fashion. There's one camp that's like, man, you must really like school, kind of like they're trying to like jab at me, and then there's the other camp that is just like, oh, I know, I get it, you know. And so the answer to your question lies in that latter camp of people who get it. I just think that there is nothing like a learning space. There is no other fertile ground on God's green earth that is like a space where people can come together and exchange ideas, learn new information, like bond over curiosity. It's a magical convening. And I remember distinctly feeling that way when I went to my first summer at Breakthrough. And I think to a weird degree, I've been chasing like that high ever since. We used to play a game called um, I think it was called Welcome Word Mania or something like this. And the game is, we have this all school meeting, this assembly, and there's a word of the day, and one student, one breakthrough scholar stands up in front of the rest of the school, and they have to speak for, I don't know, 2 to 3 minutes extemporaneously using the word with its proper definition, and they try their damnedest not to use words like like any filler words, right? And that's the game. And I remember the first time I saw that game, and I saw whoever it was, the student just crushed it. And all of his peers were like super proud of him. They were like ignited and engaged because they had learned this word, and then they had saw another student use it in a sentence, and they were a part of this like learning experiment in real time. And I was just like, this is my jam. And so that like feeling has been something that I've tried to sort of replicate, not just in my own self, but for others. So I taught special education, elementary school students, and I had sort of the range of disabilities, from intellectual, physical, some emotional challenges. And so we talk about like diversions. I thought that I was going to be teaching like high school English. I thought I was going to be like one of those teachers on the movies, like Freedom Writers, have my students, writing Hamilton or something like that, some rap or something like this. And I didn't. I taught like very basic skills, reading, writing, arithmetic. Sometimes I had a student who struggled with her motor skills, so I had to teach her how to hold a pencil to be able to, and at a very rudimentary level, the light bulb going off of like, oh my goodness, I figured this out. I can do this. Like, it was just such a joy to be able to confer that, to be able to, on someone, to be able to help someone with that, facilitate it. It was the same feeling that I remember seeing at Work on Word Mania, that I remember experiencing when like I learned how to solve quadratic equations, for example. And every place that I've ever done any education related work, it's been about trying to get after that. I always say this nerdy thing, as you know, Mariohn, about, there are few things in society, particularly American society, that um, all citizens are subject matter expertise on, but education is one of them because it's compulsory in this country. So everybody has an educational experience, whether that be public school, private school, a religious school, what have you. And so to me, it's like the most relatable experience of like, I did not know something and now I do know something, and everybody can bond with that satisfaction. So the jobs are me just trying to get that feeling, trying to source that joy.
And so with sourcing that joy, I'm assuming you've met people that have helped you along in that path. How are you, to that second part of the question, how are you now like using those networks to either propel yourself forward or propel the work that you think should be highlighted forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I do this more unsystematically than systematically, just to be honest. I think Alyssa's story is perfect on this. We we were just connecting. The entire impetus behind us talking today was we were reconnecting after some time apart. And I wanted to pick her brain, as she said. I was trying to get some thought partnership on how I could do my job better. And not only was she willing to meet me, but she was excited to meet me. Not only did she show, but she was like an incredibly engaged thought partner. And so it's almost instinctual how, when I feel like I'm running against a challenge that could use another mind to think on, if I'm at a pivotal professional juncture and I'd like some help trying to figure out what would make the best sense to be the next step. Um, if I just need a pick me up, because I'm tired, weary, sad, unmotivated, it's kind of been second nature for me to reach out to someone that's in the breakthrough community, because these are the people that I've done probably more than 50% of my life with. And so the network has yielded either some really, really great advice that I heed and execute, or some direct contact with someone who could help advance my journey along, whether that is when I was in college. My roommate went to South Africa over winter break, and he went to an HIV/AIDS orphanage while he was in South Africa. Most of his trip was like very tourist based. So, he went to, Table Mountain, he goes to like the Apartheid Museum, but they went to this orphanage, and the dude came back and was having nightmares, recurring nightmares about like just the children that he saw there, and just wondering what their fates were going to be. And I remember one morning before we went to class, he was just like, "Hey, I want to go back to South Africa. Like, I want to try to organize like a service trip or something like this. Like, are you down to come? Are you down to help?" At this juncture, I had never left the country. I didn't have a passport or anything like this. This is my sophomore year in college. He's my best friend. So I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'll help you, man. I hear you over there having nightmares about this. Like, I don't want you to do that. Like, and going to South Africa sounds dope. So let's do it." So we start putting our minds together about like how we can make this happen. We have no money. This trip that he took to South Africa was coordinated by people who professionally coordinate these trips. How can we replicate this? And the first person I reached out to was a breakthrough mentor of mine. And I was just like, I'm trying to make a project. Like, how can I do this? And I was, I got the sort of Socratic method. What are you trying to do? What's the purpose behind it? And the blueprint that I got to take that service trip to make it happen was given to me by a breakthrough mentor. And what they said was like, "You're probably not going to have enough money to purchase an international ticket. So we wrote to all the airlines in the Atlanta airport, and Delta Airlines agreed to give us free tickets so long as we could pay the taxes." They were like, "You're probably going to need money to go there. And since you're not trying to do a formal study abroad program, like you need to try to maybe figure out some sort of fundraising."
We're having some audio problem.
Can't hear me?
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Sorry. I was just saying that the blueprint to make that project happen was given to me by a breakthrough mentor. I just leveraged my network, and they quite literally gave me a project plan to go and execute. I'm only telling this story because not only did it lead to my first international trip, but it also led to me trying to organize a service project for other students to be able to go abroad, because I was like, "Oh, wow, this is really cool." And also, it's led to me living an international lifestyle, because once I kind of got bit by the travel bug, my appetite hasn't been satiated since. So the question of how do I use the breakthrough network, how have I done it in the past and how do I do it in the future? I think what's beautiful about the program is if a student goes to breakthrough and immerses themselves in the experience, it becomes a bit second nature to call upon that network, because they're the real people that you do life with. You get me?
I get you. And so I think this brings me to like my last big question. I think especially knowing your journey. So you did break through, you went to Ransom, had these phenomenal opportunities. In 2008, you go to Morehouse, and then you become so right before, you graduate right before Obama is elected. You then become the special education teacher in Atlanta through TFA. You then go to London School of Economics. So already there's this like back and forth and what's happening with your life. Then you go and join TFA Alumni Board. So there's like questions happening. I think I'm going back to the beginning question about diversions and accelerations on our path. And by 2012, you get into NYU Law. And at that point, if I remember correctly, you wanted to be a corporate lawyer. You were like set on your way. And then something happens along the way where you just actually you choose to focus on equity and social justice work, and to the point where your NYU law speech, your commencement speech for graduation is really focused on ending mass incarceration. So tell us a little bit how you, like, what happened there so that your path, instead of going into the straight line, just sort of zigzags to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, I, I'm kind of hard pressed to, I guess, be able to sort of articulate all of the dizzying parts of my journey so far. But I think what I can say is, um, I didn't have the vocabulary for it when I was younger and experiencing it, but it's just now really clear to me that um, breakthrough, my experiences with people in breakthrough taught me about community, taught me about um, the ethical responsibility to give back, taught me about um, when you help somebody, it's not just one bite at the apple, but it's a commitment over time. That was my experience. I told you just a few stories about how breakthrough people helped me over time. It wasn't just, hey, we'll help you get into this program and then leave you be. It was very much a committed investment in me. And so um, that's relevant because I was interested in education. I think I was also inclined to the classroom because that's what I knew from breakthrough. Um, and that's why after graduating from Morehouse, decided to do Teach for America because that's the tradition, I guess, that I came of age in. When I was in the classroom, I just felt like as much change I could have in these four walls as a teacher, it just didn't feel um, deep and sustainable, the change. It felt small to me, just to be frank. And this is not to denigrate the work of teachers. We're all here because we really understand the work of teachers. But I was like, these children similarly situated to my humble beginnings. I mean, poverty and economics in this country are a really difficult set of circumstances to overcome. And so I was interested in like trying to figure out economic policy. And that's why I left the classroom to go to graduate school. And so me deciding to go to law school was honestly feeling a little overwhelmed by the challenges that I started to see. And I was just like, okay, I could be a really good teacher, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing enough good. And the more I learn about the battery of challenges that my community's confronted with, I don't know, maybe I should just start at home and like change my family's financial situation. And then maybe I can look outward and help somebody else. That's just to be frank. And so um, with that notion, I took the LSAT. I applied to every school that I could, and I remember actually when I got my acceptance letters back, conferring with another breakthrough person about where I should go, and I had narrowed my options down between like some of the top tier schools and University of Miami, and for a number of reasons, we just kind of settled on it. It probably makes more sense for me to leave home and go to NYU. That was like the best opportunity. And so I was focused and aimed on the corporate sector because, I'm not an idiot. I'm like, this is a pretty clear path towards financial security for myself and by extension, my immediate family. And I should just put away some of the idealism that I could help like a bigger community because there's not really that many opportunities in this society to do that. That's where I was. And I go to school and I got a job at a nice law firm. And it was the summer that George Zimmerman was kind of exonerated or at least relieved of any charges of accusations for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And that news was really jarring to me for three reasons. One, Trayvon Martin's from Florida and his family went to my father's church. So I was like connected to the case in that way. My best friend at the time was working for a solo practitioner by the name of Ben Crump, and he was like dissatisfied with that internship because he wanted a big law job like I did, but the best he could get was this job with this lawyer who had hung his shingle. And the case that they got was the Trayvon Martin civil matter. And if you guys know who Benjamin Crump is now, he's like now the go-to lawyer for that sort of type of legal matter. But that was his first kind of big case, big opportunity. And so I'm kind of monitoring the case through my best friend. And then the third thing was at the water cooler or at the coffee machine, this law firm has hundreds of lawyers in the building. We would talk about like legal matters in pop culture. It'd be like, you hear about this celebrity suing this celebrity divorcing this celebrity. You think she's going to get custody? Did you hear about this, that, and the third? And then after the decision was rendered, I go back into this law firm and it's just deafening silence about this matter. Like nobody spoke about it. And if you even take out the racial element, it is squarely a legal matter. Stand your ground. If you guys remember this time, it's like this is a huge, wedge issue from a legal and political perspective. I saw somebody else on the chat is a lawyer, so maybe you could appreciate how absurd it is to sort of everybody have a chilling effect on talking about a seminal legal matter at the moment. There's only one reason why it didn't happen, and so I'm like really struck by this and just kind of reflecting on like, why I don't really have the organizational standing to put this on the agenda in this place. I mean, it would have been a huge faux pas for an intern. That's what a summer associate is, to say, hey guys, we should talk about this. Partners, senior associates, gather around. I'm gonna tell y'all why George Zimmerman should have had it. I can't do that, right? So I just started trying to figure out what was in my locus of control, because that seemed like an awful shame. And I started to feel, to be quite honest with you, very guilty for getting the opportunity to be able to go to one of the best law schools in the world. Just to give you some context, my zip code where I live, the annual median household income is $18,000 a year for the household. I probably spent $15,000 before I ever took one law school class, between preparation courses, between applications, between moving, deposits, all these things, trips to visit. I spent that much money just to be sort of eligible to go to this space. And so I just was kind of like, man, this is quite literally an improbable opportunity. And I'm going to just hone in on personal enrichment. It felt really nasty for me. And so that was kind of my proverbial come to Jesus moment, where I was like, I need to pivot. But it wasn't like a natural pivot for me. It was just a return to what I was used to, which is, spaces that are interested in helping others, that are focused on being in service of something larger than oneself. And I registered for every single class that had to do with civil rights, constitutional law, race in the law, so on and so forth that semester. And I met a professor who changed my trajectory.
Tell us a little bit more about this professor.
And
I say this because I know this is part one of the interview, and we will have time for part two to go into it. But in order to sort of make sure we're understanding why this is such a huge diversion, tell us a little bit more about this professor.
Yeah. So I can be long-winded, so I apologize, guys. But the best way to tell the story is just to show you how aloof I was. So I'm coming from the corporate legal background, so I don't really know much about public interest law at the time. So I registered for these courses, and I go to my race in the law course on the first day of class, and it's standing room only. Like, it's just filled to, like, I thought that they were giving away free food or something like this. And we're waiting for the professor to come in, and I hear like whispers like, do you think he's actually going to teach the course? Like, what's going on? And it turned out that this course was taught by a really popular, now I would say famous civil rights criminal justice attorney named Bryan Stevenson. Prior to that year, he did a TED talk, and he got like the longest running. He broke the record for like standing ovations and raising funds in however long they let TED talk people raise funds. Like, for his speech, I recommend you guys to look up this speech. And so he's like a rock star, and everybody who's anybody in public interest is trying to take this guy's course so that they can get an audience with him and get some sort of access. But I just blindly registered for the course. And so in walks Bryan Stevenson. He teaches the first day of his course. And then after the course, he calls me up to the front of the class and he says, Mr. Ferguson, I think that you might have made a mistake. And I'm like, after I was enthralled with the man for 90 minutes. I'm like, I ain't make no mistake. I need to be here, you know? And he's like, I think there's been a clerical error. At the time, you could only take his course if you also did his clinic. What Brian Stevenson is successful for is he is probably the most preeminent death penalty attorney in the United States. He's argued successfully in front of the Supreme Court 5 times, leading to the unconstitutionality of like a lot of our death penalty regime. He's doing really, really great work in the vein of shifting the narrative of race in our country. And he had this specially designed course at NYU where students who were in his lecture and seminar had to also work for his firm. But because I just registered for the courses, I wasn't in the internship. I was just in the course. I had like kind of glitched the system. So when he called me up at the end of class, he was like, if you made this mistake, you should drop this course. But you made some interesting remarks today, so I would like for you to consider staying. And I listened, and the kind of rest was personal history for me.
Okay, this is where we're gonna stop the official story, Terron, so that we can save up some juice for next time. Just for sake of time and to, right now I have one question in the chat from Pat. So from the perspective of a growth mindset, can you imagine how else Breakthrough could have helped you at moments along your journey and as it continues?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I have had to learn how to do this in a healthy way, but because I was so supported by Breakthrough, and oftentimes that support bordered on celebration, I carry with me just a will to see the right thing, because I feel as though I am reimbursing this.
Wait, Terron, wait. The audio just blew up. Can you just say what you just said again?
What's the last thing you heard me say, Alyssa?
Celebration, I carry with me.
Yeah, sorry. So I said, because I've been so strongly supported and celebrated by the Breakthrough community, I carry with me this notion that I want to succeed and do the right thing to reimburse the community that has given me so much. I use the term reimburse, not like carrying a debt, because that's what I've had to negotiate a very healthy relationship with this, but I really want to reimburse Breakthrough for the investment that is made on me. Like I said, I've been through a number of organizations, educational experiences, interventions, if you will, where it's a one touch point that's meant to be this sort of silver bullet solution, or, you know, this like, okay, now voila, it's done. And in my experience, that is not how life works. And out of every organization that I'm affiliated with, Breakthrough has been a recurring, committed, protracted relationship in my life. And so if people are going to spend that much time supporting my journey, then I feel like I have to keep the growth mindset at the forefront of like, I can do more, I can reach for the stars, I can still be an astronaut if I want to, kind of thing.
I feel personally called out with that last statement.
I was coming at you. That's true.
We have time for maybe one more question, and if not, I'm going to ask one question of the audience, but I'll just give about 10 seconds to see if there are any last questions anybody wants to come off of mute or put it in the chat before I ask my question.
I can ask a question. I was
Go
typing in the chat, but I couldn't type fast enough.
Go for it.
I'm just curious if there's anything that you would want Breakthrough as an organization to shift or evolve, either because potentially your experiences at that private school or as an adult, or even just given everything that has transpired in our country since March 2020.
Yeah, I think that, like, you know, I'm giving you guys some pretty glimmers, but it's not always pretty, you know? Like, I wanted to tell you two stories. Obviously, I didn't want to give you like some of the, most egregious, but there are some tough times. And I think that, I have worked in educational philanthropy, and I understand because of some of the practical constraints, like, you have to fundraise, for example, you have to, do programming, and you have to do programming within certain parameters. A lot of times there's like all kinds of liability. There's like the need to show impact and measurements. There's like having a value proposition in a crowded market. Like, I understand some organizational realities that can challenge the work. And so one temptation that I see all over the place is the instinct to sort of be reductive about individual journeys. It's like, I've been in spaces where people are like, he went to Breakthrough and then boom, it just put kerosene on his life and he took off. And that just isn't the truth, And so I think if anything that this current like political landscape should be showing us is that like life is very unwieldy. It is a lot of gray. It requires nuance and nuanced thinking, precision with respect to your communication about issues and stories. And if you take that down a notch to your work, you have a heightened obligation, a responsibility to treat the breakthrough students with that same level of specificity to their idiosyncratic journeys. If you don't do that, you are being worse than negligent, but you're engaging in malpractice with people's lives. And I don't mean to say that to sort of fearmonger, but I take education that seriously. That's the same type of care that I wish that I was handled with all throughout my educational journey. And the people that I've taken closest to, they have treated me as such.
I love this. Thank you, Terron. I appreciate all of this. I'm going to stop talking so that I can actually have Alex, who's our phenomenal program officer, close out for us. But thank you so much for your time, Terron, and for your story. And I cannot wait to continue this in a couple of weeks with you with part 2.